How we doing? Ready for day two? Yeah. All right, let's do it. Good afternoon and welcome to day two of the 2025 Tana Lectures on Human Values hosted by the Whitney Humanities Center. My name is Cajetan, Iheka, and I serve as director of the center. Thank you for joining us. Yesterday, Professor Davis offered a robust and comprehensive genealogy of abolition as a scholarly and artistic and activist endeavor, and it's linked to interdisciplinary areas such as feminism and Black studies. Among other things, I took away a refusal to personalize freedom and the insistence on interrogating myths of origin. Whether in the rejection of the incomplete account of the founding of collective resistance, or in the scrutiny of the seductions of individual freedom, Professor Davis reminded us of the importance of collectivity as a political standpoint, an ethical position, and a subject of intellectual inquiry. I have not forgotten that Professor Davis invited our students to look up certain terms. I hope you did your homework. We'll be checking on them soon. I thank Professor Davis for her generosity, for the stimulating lecture, and for really taking the time to engage with the members of our community. I gave an extensive overview of the Tana lectures yesterday. In the interest of time, I will only offer a very condensed version, and here it goes. This lectures on human values was established by the American scholar, industrialist, and philanthropist, Robert Clark Tanner, and his wife, Grace Tanner. In creating the lectureships, Professor Tanner said, and I quote, "I see this lecture simply as a search for a better understanding of human behavior and human values. This understanding may be pursued for its own intrinsic worth, but it may also eventually have practical consequences for the quality of person and social life." Close quote. Professor Davis's lecture today, Abolition, Learning for Global Trajectories, advances the vision of the Tanners. It does so in its preoccupation with the kind of human flourishing that emerges from the reconstitution of the social. Please hold your questions until the end of the lecture. And if you're called, kindly get to the point quickly so we can take as many questions as possible. Let me remind you that the university is committed to protecting free expression and peaceful dissent. Interfering with the speaker's ability to speak and the audience's ability to hear is not consistent with the university's policy. I want to thank again everyone who has contributed to the realization of these lectures. My colleagues at the center, colleagues across campus who work on incarceration, our volunteers and student workers, and the Office of the Chaplain. Please give them a round of applause. Among my people, the Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria, it is said that Anage Anu Ofuebe Ekiri Nukumau. This translates as, you don't stay in one place to grasp, to see a big masquerade. Because of that, I'm now delighted to welcome Professor Elizabeth Hinton to provide another view of the book Masquerade in view of an introduction. Dr. Hinton is Professor of History, African American Studies and Law, a world-leading authority on mass incarceration and police violence. Our books include From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime, The Making of Mass Incarceration in America, and America on Fire, The Untold Story of Police Violence and Black Rebellion since the 1960s. Please join me in welcoming Professor Hinton to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please bear with me through my voice here. Thank you, Professor Iheka, for the invitation to be here. It is a rare and profound honor to introduce a scholar whose vision, courage, and intellect have not only shaped entire fields of inquiry, but whose very life has challenged and transformed the meaning of justice in our own time, Professor Angela Y. Davis. To introduce Professor Davis is not simply to name a historic figure. It is to invoke a struggle, one that spans continents and centuries, classrooms and courtrooms, bookshelves and prison walls. And in that struggle, Angela Davis has stood as both witness and warrior, philosopher and freedom fighter. She was born in Birmingham, Alabama, Birmingham, in the crucible of American apartheid, just a few blocks from the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 of her childhood friends were murdered in a white supremacist terror bombing in 1963. Her mother, Sally Davis, an activist in the Southern Negro Youth Congress, raised her in a household steeped in the Black radical tradition. Her early education and political struggle began not in theory, but in the urgency of survival. In 1969, at just 25 years old, Angela Davis became one of the youngest and most embattled professors in the country. She was fired from her position at UCLA in the philosophy department, not because of any failure of intellect, pedagogy, or ethics, but because of who she was and what she believed. As a Black woman, as a former Brandeis student whose understanding of philosophy never separated the abstract from the lived. As a brilliant scholar trained in Frankfurt and under Herbert Marcuse at UC San Diego, as a Marxist, as a feminist, as a member of the Communist Party's Che Lumumba Club. Her firing, engineered by then Governor Ronald Reagan and rubber-stamped by the UC regents, was a calculated political spectacle. It was about more than just purging a subversive presence from the academy, more than a test case on the university's ban on hiring communists. It was a test case for the soul of the university. As Professor Davis said then, and as we are still learning now, this was an effort to police the boundaries of who gets to think, to teach, to imagine freedom. Her firing was a calculated attempt to criminalize Black radical intellect, a warning shot in the escalating war on academic freedom, and a chilling harbinger of the ideological witch hunts we are now living through, where entire fields like ethnic studies, gender and sexuality studies, and Black studies are being censored, defunded, and defamed. These disciplines were born out of struggle, as Professor Davis reminded us yesterday, and of which Davis herself was at the forefront, and always most vulnerable to repression. Today, higher education is being targeted, history distorted, DEI offices shuttered. And again, we are told that the danger lies not in the systems we critique, but in the critiques themselves. And I would be remiss if I didn't use this occasion to urge you to join faculty and students from across the university tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. on Cross Campus in front of Sterling Memorial Library for a rally to stand together for higher education. Organized by the Yale chapter of the American Association of University Professors, we are gathering to protect all people, programs, and research at Yale and at schools across the country. Angela Davis warned us, and she paid the price for telling the truth too early. But in doing so, she became a symbol of something far greater than one academic appointment. Her defiance, her refusal to answer Reagan's political test, her resistance helped awaken a generation. She fought and won reinstatement at UCLA, only to be fired again, this time for inflammatory language. And even that could not stop her. Angela Davis continued to struggle. Just 1 year later, she was arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy, charges rooted not in action, but in association. Davis was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list at just 26 years old. She faced the death penalty, and she endured over a year in jail before being acquitted on all counts by an all-white jury. It is impossible to overstate what this moment meant for abolition, for due process, for Black women, for political prisoners around the world. In that trial, Angela Davis became the face of a global solidarity movement, but she never asked for heroism. She asked instead for analysis, for courage, for a new way of imagining justice. That is the work she has done ever since at Claremont, at San Francisco State, and finally at UC Santa Cruz, where she served for 17 years as Distinguished Professor of History of Consciousness and Feminist Studies. Along the way, she helped pioneer fields that powerfully reimagined justice, Black feminist thought, abolitionist theory, prison studies. She helped make the impossible thinkable. And yet, her radical, relentless, ever-evolving influence cannot be contained in the confines of any institution or even her numerous path-breaking books and articles. It is carried by the young people in this room, by every organizer calling to end state-sanctioned violence, to dismantle the carceral regime, to dream beyond punishment. It is carried by Maurice Blackwell and Hakeem Jefferson and Alpha Jallow, star graduates of Yale's Prison Education Initiative, who are now home and in this audience and thriving. And it is carried in the very title of Professor Davis's Tanner Lectures, Abolition. Angela Davis taught us that abolition is not merely the absence of cages, but the presence of care, communities of care. Not just tearing down unjust institutions, but building new, life-affirming ones in their place. And I stand here at Yale, a place where the fight over who gets to ask questions, to teach truth, to challenge power, is far from over. I am reminded that Professor Davis's words are not history. They are not history. They are prophecy. They are invitation. And they have always been the future. Please join me in welcoming back to the stage a political philosopher of unparalleled brilliance and a scholar activist of world historical proportions, Professor Angela Y. Davis.
Wow, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint after that introduction. But let me begin by extending my thanks to all of the wonderful people I thanked yesterday. And I didn't expect so many of you would be here the second time. So how many of you were also here yesterday? Okay. So let me thank the Tanner Committee, as well as the Whitney Humanities Center and its amazing director, Cajetan Iheka, the Deputy Director, Diane Barrett-Brown, the Whitney staff and executive committee. And I see, Rod, you're sitting in the same place where you sat yesterday. Oh, no, that's right, you sat on the, well, I see other people I know too. But thank you so much for contacting me and asking me if I would do these lectures. And that was well over a year ago, wasn't it? And the world has changed since then. But before I go on, let me again acknowledge all of the faculty who signed that letter to the president and the provost, calling upon them to stand up and not succumb to political threats. And I want to join Elizabeth in urging all of you to attend the event tomorrow, which is one of many that are being held all over the country. This is, I think, the first time we've had the opportunity to engage in this kind of concerted, organized resistance throughout the country. So please attend. It's at what time? At noon? 12:30, okay. So yesterday, I also thanked Yale's for Palestine, and I think I need to do that again. And I think I have a meeting with some of you tomorrow. Right? A small group, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm sorry it wasn't able to be organized before this last event. I have a little footnote for those of you who were here yesterday for my presentation, which was a tentative attempt at a genealogy of contemporary abolition, both its fields of study and its activist struggles. And I included some gestures toward police abolition and toward the immigrant, and toward resistance to the immigrant detention facilities that are all over the country. And yesterday I pointed out that one of them is located in the very same place that was the center of a great deal of anti-racist struggles back in 2007. Now, I said I gave a tentative genealogy. But something is always missing from genealogies. They can never be complete. And yesterday after I finished the lecture, I began to think about, all of those things I should have included. I always do that, And I'm not gonna ask you to listen to me as I enumerate all of them. But I realized that I didn't include something that I think is quite significant, and that is the child welfare system as an important site of abolitionist activity. So if you are developing an abolition reading list, I tried to provide you with some references yesterday. Hold on one second, I need to take a sip of water. So, for those of you who are developing a reading list, add Dorothy Roberts, who's, do you know Dorothy Roberts? Okay. A legal scholar, and if we want to speak very specifically about the legal school of critical race theory, she's a very important part of that. Her most recent book is entitled Torn Apart, and she presents very compelling arguments for the utilization of abolitionist frameworks with respect to what she has called the family policing system. And most of us know it as the child welfare system. but she's urging us to adopt new vocabularies as well. And since I apparently cannot resist the urge to offer you readings, this is a university campus after all, and that's what you're supposed to be doing, right? Reading and thinking should occupy most of your time here. So I'll give you an additional book. Edited by Mimi Kim, who's a professor of social work and an amazing activist. The title is Abolition and Social Work, Possibilities, Paradoxes, and the Practice of Community Care. Now, oh, you know something? I forgot to start my timer. I promised I wouldn't speak so long today. So, but now I don't know how long I've been speaking. And, wait, no, that's not the right thing. Okay, yeah, so I'm setting it for how long? Half an hour? Is that all right? Is that all right? Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, global trajectories. In this second lecture, I would like to look at the trajectories of abolitionist work on global terrain. And so I'll begin by saying that we find ourselves today in various interlocking states of emergency with respect to the attacks on our universities, especially attacks on international students who have shown the courage to speak out during this period. The Gaza genocide has already claimed the lives of 50,000 people, more than 50,000 people, including the more than 1,500 who have been killed since Israel broke the ceasefire. And I'm sure you already have these figures, and they emanate from the Palestinian Health Ministry. But I repeat them because we cannot allow ourselves to become numb to extinguished lives, oceans away, whose memories are preserved for us in the form of statistics. And we all know that some 70% of those who have been killed are women and children. And that is to say very clearly non-combatants. Since the war began, student protesters have made sure that we are unable, in good conscience, to push the memories of those lost lives into the recesses of our memory, robbing them of their capacity to inspire us to resist. We're talking about the world, and at this moment, Palestine continues to be the center of the world, as its people are subject to an ongoing genocide that shows no signs of abating. On Sunday, the very last fully functional hospital in Gaza, a Christian hospital, came under attack. El Ali Hospital was bombed, forcing critically ill Palestinians to flee. Every day, every week, every month, the lives of more Palestinians are violently expunged from their families and their communities, material, intellectual, and cultural lives. regardless of what we might think about the underlying politics of what is so often referred to as the conflict, as if the two sides of the conflict are relatively equal, as if one side of the conflict not only is not a nuclear power, but does not also possess weapons of mass destruction, as if these weapons of mass destruction had not been supplied by the greatest military power in the world, now controlled by someone determined to carry out his fascist programs and those of the billionaires he represents. As more and more lives are extinguished, how is it that certain people have been persuaded that there are lives that do not matter, that there are humans who are nothing outside of their roles defined by Zionism as universally equivalent demographic threats? Palestine is a scene of historical and continuing resistance to quotidian as well as extraordinary carceralities. And Palestinian intellectuals and activists, through their resistance, have helped to hone understanding and to inspire methodologies of abolitionist struggles, as well as their role in continuing to encourage an important dimension of international solidarity within North American abolitionist struggles. So the point that I want to make in the beginning is that theories and practices of abolition do not work except within the framework of solidarity. Now, Black people in North America, especially in the United States, know a great deal about solidarity, about being the recipients of solidarity. Generations and generations of freedom movements would never have unfolded had it not been for the many expressions of solidarity emanating from all over the globe. The anti-slavery abolitionist movement would never have achieved relative success, and I say relative success, if not for the collective expressions of solidarity. And so abolition emerges as real historical possibility because of and through the forging and unfolding of solidarity. Frederick Douglass traveled to Ireland twice in the 1840s, welcomed by the Belfast Anti-Slavery Society. The historical memory of the ties between Irish people and people of African descent in the US is still quite powerful. And recently, about a year and a half ago, I think, a sculpture of Frederick Douglass was unveiled in the center of Belfast, near the Presbyterian Church where he spoke twice in the 1840s. He was a guest of the Belfast Anti-Slavery Society. And I should tell you that when I went to Belfast, it was as if that visit from Frederick Douglass had only happened a few years ago. People were talking about it in that way. There were murals. And so the point that I'm making is that people of African descent here in this country have been the beneficiaries of international solidarity. We have been the beneficiaries of international solidarity so frequently that we might believe that solidarity is owed to us. But solidarity is always freely offered with no expectations of anything in return. Solidarity extricates us from the deadening impact of capitalist exchange, the universal fungibility that leads us to assume that everything has a price. Herein lies the aesthetics of solidarity. It allows us to feel how we should feel about every gift we receive and every gift we offer. In pulling us out of the abstractness of exchange, solidarity reminds us of how deeply we are connected, and that those connections are not mediated by a price. How deeply we are connected, not only as humans, but as conscious animals who cohabit a planet with other non-human conscious animals. We are animals who might experience a close kinship with non-human animals, if not for speciesism, if not for human supremacy with all its ties to white supremacy and heteropatriarchy. Our individual lives are finite and ever so brief, imperceptible, really, on the scale of the universe and its time. But our abolitionist imagination, combined with solidarity, allows us to discover infinite possibility in our relationships to each other and across space and time, toward the past and toward the future. But we have to be periodically reminded of our historical relationships. In the aftermath of the murder of Trayvon Martin, Black Lives Matter emerged. Black Lives Matter emerged as, one might say, an expression of 21st century abolitionist movements. And this happened as activists in Ferguson conducted the very first extended protests of this century. You know, we used to believe that we would go out and protest and, maybe for a day, maybe for 2 days, but then in this country we're not taught to have patience. And so if we weren't successful in 2 days, we'd go home and declare that we had lost. And so Ferguson was the first time that the protests went on and on and on and on. No doubt also inspiring the encampments that many of you have experienced, not to announce an endpoint. So Those first extended protests of this century guaranteed that the name of Mike Brown would live on, and that also we would better learn how to engage and struggle against racist police violence that has forever plagued Black people and Black struggle. And many of us learned in the course of that struggle what we should have known all along, that the designation Black is not a narrow racial identity. It is a powerful political identity that has been forged over centuries of struggle. It is not primarily a simplistic way of attaching individuals to a group identity, but represents for so many in the world the impulse to fight for the kind of freedom that strives toward universality. Saying that Black Lives Matter was a more accurate way of saying that all lives matter. That all lives could not matter until Black lives matter. And so now, lessons from South Africa. The anti-apartheid movement was supported everywhere, all over the world, because we were motivated by the idea that the dismantling of apartheid would bring the entire world one step closer to freedom. But you know, our collective imagination is oftentimes so much more powerful than the realities we want to transform. So we have to learn how to inhabit both of those realms. When, during the post-apartheid era, police were dispatched to put down the Marikana miners' strike in 2012, resulting in the massacre of striking workers, we learned from South African anti-police movements that virtually every single actor in that story, in the story of the Marikana massacre, was Black. The striking miners were Black. The police sent to put down the strike were Black. The local police chief was Black. The head of the ministry overseeing all of the police in South Africa was Black. As a matter of fact, the local police chief was a Black woman. I should make that point. So we learned about the constraints of structure. Decades-long calls for more Black police in this country, calls for police representing the community. Some of you are familiar with that, right? Police representing the community, we learned, could never have prevented racist police structures from prevailing. Sorry, my text is jumping around on my iPad. So, I think what we learned from this is that Marikana massacre was such a compelling lesson regarding the capacity of racist structures to outlive the racial transformations assumed to be necessarily progressive. If the structures of apartheid, like the police force, remained intact, so structural violence would live on. A lesson here about abolition: policing itself would have to be abolished. Public safety would have to be based on something entirely different from the official violence and the threat of violence. It would have to be based on providing to the miners the rights their union was demanding. It would have to be based on the forging of economic equality more broadly, the transformation of the mining industry, the availability of housing, education, and the thoroughgoing and radical transformation of post-apartheid South Africa. We tend to believe that things can be changed at one strike, that Nelson Mandela becomes elected the president of the new South Africa, and then all of the past history falls away. And then suddenly, the clocks stop, and we enter into a new time. And, despite the fact of the clock stopping as the metaphor for revolution always being used, it has never happened that way. And abolition not only urges a kind of patience, but the recognition that rebuilding a new society is not an easy thing. And it happens over time. And I'm still, quite upset that as soon as the apartheid regime fell, those of us all over the world who had been with South Africa for many years, decades even, we felt that our job was done. And we didn't stick around to assist in the process of rebuilding South Africa. That remains to be done. Palestine solidarity. Unfortunately, there are those who have been made very stupid by capitalist ideologies of universal equivalencies, and they can't tell the difference between the richness of relationality and solidarity in struggle on the one hand, and the abstractness and lifelessness of exchangeability and accumulation on the other. Even as Palestinians have been compelled to live under the circumstances of a 100-year war, and there's another book that bears the title, The 100-Year War on Palestine, by Rashid Khalidi. You should read that because you will see virtually the same thing being repeated over and over and over again, as if repetition is going to achieve anything at all. The 100-year-old war is all about disproportionality with respect to the military power of the State of Israel and the inhabitants of Palestine. But solidarity cannot be understood in relation to proportionality and disproportionality. It is about deep relationality. Abolition is driven by the collective imagination. It is never about focusing so myopically on that which one wants to abolish that one fails to understand the conditions that enable the possibility of abolition. And we here in the US who have participated in a kind of long trajectory toward abolition have been greatly assisted in that process by the Palestinian people. Various abolition movements would have been impossible to build under the ideological conditions of presumed US supremacy in the world. Again, we have been made very stupid by the assumptions that we in the US matter most to the world, that this is the center of the world, that this is the center of the universe, so much so that the settler colonialism that has produced racial capitalism has been extended to include voyages to other planets. Pollute and destroy this planet, and the solution is to occupy Mars. And we laugh. But that is what is on the agenda. Look at, what's his name who has the Teslas? Anyway, abolitionist movements never succeed if they are so sharply focused on one object that they fail to grasp that we cannot even understand that object, much less presume to abolish it, except in dialectical relation to its material and ideological and local and global surroundings. So if you're interested in these dynamics, here I go. I'm going to give you another book to read. And this is a real book. It'll take a long time. And I'm talking about Capital by Karl Marx. And notice especially the structure of the text, beginning with the question, what is a commodity? And pursuing this simple question, although its simplicity is immediately demystified by the fact that the first step to understanding the commodity is the recognition of commodity fetishism. And then it takes 3 volumes. Actually, a 4th volume, which is called Theories of Surplus Value, to try to understand what is a commodity. And then there's the collectively authored text, another book for you, by Stuart Hall et al., which is entitled Policing the Crisis, Mugging the State, Law and Order. There's a similar structure, beginning with the question, what is a mugging. And it turns out that that mugging is racially inflected. And it turns out that we have to understand moral panics, and we have to understand the police and statistics and media and hegemony and crises, etc., in order to answer that simple question. And I'll say parenthetically that this text demonstrates the value of interdisciplinarity and what you might call problem-centered analyses. There's no good place to conclude these, and I don't want to conclude them, but I did. But if it were up to me, I'd be up here for the next several hours talking to you. But yesterday I went on too long, and we weren't able really to have a question and answer period. So I'm just going to say this, and I realize I have 29 seconds left. That if we believe in the future, it must be based on our own collective confidence, not the confidence we arrive at as individuals, but what we believe we can achieve if we lean on each other, if we hold each other up. Okay, that's my time. Come on, now go up. But I still have one more phrase. I hadn't reached the end of that sentence, so let me just say, if we believe in the future, it must be based on our own collective confidence, not the confidence we arrive at as individuals, but what we believe we can achieve if we lean on each other, if we hold each other up, if we support each other, if we live inside global solidarity with the help of abolitionist ethics and the embrace, we live inside the embrace across oceans and all of the love that emanates from our togetherness. Thank you very much.
I'm going to try and call 3 people, they ask, and then we'll turn it over to you, and we'll take another 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
So do I have to make do several questions at the same time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you, Professor Davis, for that wonderful lecture and the injunction at the end. And we've listened, we hope we will carry that with us as we leave today. So we promise we'll take questions today, and we want to live up to that promise. So I want to ask you to raise your hands. We'll take 3 at a time. Please get straight to the point. So we can really have room to engage with Professor Davis. Let's make sure we get to the point. So 3 at a time. I see one hand here, so I begin here, and a second one here, and a third one here. So let's do that.
Thank you for being here, Professor Davis. My name is Aubriana, and I'm a junior here at Yale. I'm part of a horizontal abolitionist collective on campus called Why Care, and if anyone's interested, we're at Yale Abolitionist Collective on Instagram. And I was led to abolition from my experience growing up with my dad in prison. I wanted to ask a question about how abolition is often framed in mainstream discourse. And since you mentioned George Jackson, prison intellectuals, and the Attica uprising yesterday, I thought this would be a good moment to bring it back up. I've been reflecting on how abolition is often discussed as an end goal with non-reformist reforms framed as necessary stepping stones. But I also think it's important to hold space for more radical forms of resistance, especially considering the concentrated violence inside prisons. I'd like to quote a line from the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, who wrote in their piece, "Destroy all prisons tomorrow," and I quote, "We are abolitionists not only because we envision and are committed to building a new world, but also because people we love are trapped in these facilities that existentially depend on abominable practices of slavery and torture, and that maintain an intolerable white supremacist social order for the rest of us. We won't let those who resist from inside the walls, who demand freedom first and freedom now, to be quietly swept into the shadows for the sake of easier arguments with abolition's opponents," end quote. With that in mind, what are your thoughts on including tactics rooted in self-defense and more confrontational resistance within the broader abolitionist framework? Thank you.
There's a second hand here somewhere. Is a second? Okay. Number two here. Yeah, okay, yeah. And then there's a third one here. Yeah. Let's get straight to the point, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I meant to ask this a question yesterday, and I didn't get the chance, but I'll be brief, so I wrote it down, okay? I don't think that I could consider
Do you mind
myself...
standing up so that...
I mean, I'm 5'1",
is that
I don't
okay?
know how much... Okay. I don't think I could consider myself an honest student of your work if I didn't bring attention to my brothers and sisters and siblings who aren't and or weren't present, specifically yesterday, at this event because of increased ICE presence on this campus, specifically yesterday. Some even being alerted not to enter campus buildings due to this. Those who are a threat are largely, but not exclusively, those who protested and called for the abolition of the largest open-air prison and genocide today in Gaza created by the apartheid state of Israel. And I encourage everyone, when we talk about free speech, to never forget to mention the words and the people of Gaza. And so my question to you is, how do you compare and or look at the relationship between the prison as we traditionally understand it and Gaza? And the last thing that I will say, and I'll make it very quick, is IVs, and I speak not from a place of superiority or judgment, have a tendency to intellectualize without tangible action and to look at theories, while simultaneously calling for, quote, law and order where there is no justice. When we talk about abolition, I hope we all think about how we should call for this institution to stop funding the apartheid state of Israel that has murdered so many innocent people. And that means when you stand over there for free speech, you're not talking just about free speech. Free speech is being attacked because there are innocent people who are being killed. Our brothers are pulling with their hands into the rubble their brothers and sisters. Fight for these people. As James Baldwin said to you, as if we are at that corridor. Because if they come for you during the day, if they come for them during the day, they'll come for us at night.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being with us this evening. I work with young people, so this is dedicated to them. In a time when so many issues intersect, racial justice, climate change, gender equality, and economic inequality, how do we as young activists stay grounded in hope that we're taking the bold and collective steps across different movements?
No, I just wanted to have that microphone. Is it okay if I use this one? Okay. Yeah. Wow, thank you all so much. I feel like I should sit down and let you do your teaching. I think I learned so much from listening to all three of you that I'm kind of hesitant to be the one who is expected to offer solutions. But I guess my answer in response to all three of the questions. Well, the first question, I think that, let me start with the first question. I think that sometimes we focus a bit too much on the nature of our tactics before we begin to reflect on what it is we're called upon to do. And this is why often it is assumed that if one is a revolutionary, one has to endorse violence. And I shouldn't say violence, because now I find myself using the language that our adversaries use. But I guess what I wanted to say in response to the first question is that however it might be possible to bring people together, I think that is our primary task. And people in prison have learned that they can generate the power not only to bring about some changes that are important behind bars. I mean, for example, one of the key demands in the Attica Rebellion was for education, was for political education. And as a matter of fact, so many of the educational processes that developed later in prisons all over the country, only to be dismantled in 1994 under the which one was that? That was, who was the president? Yeah, I forgot his name. No, just joking. But there's an amazing film called The Graduation. I don't know whether it's on the campus, but it's about the struggle for education in prisons, specifically in New York, but it reflects, what was happening then all over the country. And I think that, what was most threatening to those who wanted to, like Rockefeller, who wanted to guarantee that the rebellion was put down, was the educational dimension. And as a matter of fact, there are people today who talk about how meaningful their time in prison was, precisely because of access to that education. I don't know if you're familiar with Miss Majors, who is one of the leaders in the trans movement. She was in Attica, and she met Big Black, Frank Smith, whom everybody called Big Black. And she says now that her political education came from her friendship with Big Black. And so, in response to that question, it seems to me that that the ways in which the thirst for education was forged, was created, was collectively created, that was the most radical thing about that, and also the abolitionist demands that emerged in the context of the Attica struggle. That was actually 1971, the very first notion that it might be possible to get rid of these institutions. So, I think we need to think a little more deeply about what it means to engage in struggle for radical change, and how that can assume many forms, and not always, and certainly not necessarily, the form of engaging in, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we always need confrontation, but how do we define confrontation? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? And it may be that I've been through so many instantiations of revolutionary struggle, and I can remember when I would say exactly what you did, and when I believed that the revolution was about to happen. Not only, anti-racism, but anti-capitalists. We definitely thought we were on the verge of overturning capitalism. And that was good. I mean, we didn't do it. But we have the historical memory of that sense of urgency, and the same sense of urgency should exist now. Because, and let me just say, see, I tend to go on, and I have to catch myself. But I know that there are some brothers here who are, I didn't get the names. Elizabeth mentioned you, who, Hakeem, where are you? Okay, can you, oh, thank you for standing up. And I say that because we need you, my brothers. I am convinced that so much of the intellectual energy that exists inside the country's prisons today can assist us in the process of bringing about radical change out here on the outside. So we'll get together, okay? But thank you so much. And then there was the, what's the next question? I made notes that are now. Yeah. Oh, right, yes. Well, that is one of the lessons I think abolition has learned, one of the key lessons abolition has learned from Palestine. And I can give you some very simple examples. Early on in the anti-prison movement, there were those who believed that there were alternatives, that there were carceral alternatives to imprisonment, right? That maybe the ankle bracelets and house arrests were viable alternatives to the institution of the prison. There were people who said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good thing. At least we won't be locked up inside." But we learned from the Palestinian experience in Gaza and on the West Bank that, as you pointed out, prisons can also be open-air prisons, that one's behavior can be absolutely controlled. And in a sense, it might be about an attempt, if you've read, how many of you have read Foucault, The Birth of the Prison? And of course, his argument is that the ways in which prisoners are controlled and the internalization of those modes of control are what capitalist society needs in order to control people in the larger environment. And so, yeah, we can't be satisfied with all of the various carceralities of surrounding the lives of Palestinians. And I think we learned early on when we went to Palestine. When was that, Gina? 2012, 2011? Yeah, a delegation of women of color, of indigenous and women of color, scholar activists visited Palestine. A number of us were involved in the abolitionist movement. And we had very probing questions. And well, one of the things that we noticed, I think Gina at one point asked in a meeting, a large meeting, how many of you have ever been to prison? And every single person raised their hand. And we also learned that we had similar experiences in Black audiences. You'd ask people, how many of you have ever been to prison? Or how many of you have a relative who's been to prison? And almost virtually everybody would raise their hands. And so I think that the question of the relationship between the everyday, the quotidian carceralities and the imprisonment is one that we should take very seriously. We don't want to argue for a world in which we get rid of the extraordinary carceralities but retain the quotidian carceralities. Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for everything else that you said. I'd like to talk to you afterwards. I'm not doing very well here. I can't even read my own writing. Free speech. What was the last question? No, just
Basically, there's a lot of young leaders. Like, how do we keep hope on different movements for the stuff that they're involved in?
Crossing movements, right?
Staying motivated. You talked about when George Floyd's situation happened, how majority of the people continue to stay out in the streets. What about those that kind of feel like they didn't hear us? Let's go home, pack our bags, move on to the next subject. But how do we keep that still going?
Yeah. I like to say there are questions that can't be answered in the abstract, that can't necessarily be answered except in the course of trying to accomplish that about which you are questioning. Because, people sometimes move from movement to movement. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people don't have that much patience. I just want to see them stay in the movement. So I had the experience of seeing someone who was doing really amazing work in critical resistance, but then for one reason or another left. But then he went to work for Jewish Voice for Peace. And so I said, right on, that's okay. But I guess the underlying that question that you ask is commitment to the struggle. And I think that what we should be trying to encourage is some kind of deep commitment to fight for change, no matter how, and no matter under what organizational circumstances. So I wouldn't worry about that. What I would worry about is a person leaving entirely or getting bored entirely, which happens. And I suppose I would suggest that you think about ways in which you can encourage those who are doing that kind of, what would you call it? What? Yeah, but I'm talking about the organizing in which you move from one realm to another. You would encourage them to stay committed. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in terms of being connected to movements like that, I think that it's really important to find something that you like, that you're deeply fulfilled by. Not something that you're doing because you feel obligated to doing it, because that's not going to last very long. You'll do it for a year or two, but then you'll think, I actually feel much better writing poetry than I feel. Well, I'm going to give you an old school example, knocking on people's doors, which used to be the role of the organizer. But you understand what I'm saying. I think that what is most important is to discover that which you are passionate about and try to offer that gift to the movement. Regardless of what this person might say is the most important thing to do right now. Everything is important. And we don't have to create hierarchies of involvement, that it's more important to do the social media work than it is to compose a musical piece. We were talking about music for abolition yesterday. And I think that if you find what you enjoy doing, what you really feel fulfilled by, then you'll stick with it. And that is what you're supposed to be doing on this campus, discovering your passions, right? And don't let people tell you that this is what you should be doing. Just recognize that you can best contribute to radical change, to abolition, to revolution, by finding something that you are really passionate about. And faculty members, once you see that students have discovered what they're passionate about, encourage them. Encourage them. That is what we are supposed to do as educators, help you discover what you really love, what drives you, what will allow you to best contribute to the world. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think that's a good place to leave it. Please join me in thanking Professor Davis for an amazing work.